My wife confessed her betrayal. Without shedding a tear, she crossed her arms and said, "You'll forgive me. You have nowhere to go. No one." And nothing. She went upstairs, certain she'd won. I smiled because the secret she never knew would destroy her life. The tea kettle had just stopped whistling when she set her phone on the marble island face up. On the screen was a message from Julian. The words left zero room for interpretation. I looked at the text, then up at Clara. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't shed a single tear. Instead, she leaned against the counter, crossed her arms, and tilted her head with that familiar predatory smirk. "It's been going on for 8 months," she said, her voice completely flat. I stood holding an empty ceramic mug, watching the woman I had been married to for 6 years treat the destruction of our marriage like an overdue utility bill. "You're not even going to deny it?" I asked quietly. "Why would I lie to you?" Clara let out a dry, dismissive laugh. "Let's be realistic, David. You're not leaving." She took a slow step toward the stairs, looking down at me like I was a stray dog she had graciously allowed indoors. "You'll forgive me. You have nowhere to go, no one, and nothing." She tapped her manicured nails against the handrail and walked upstairs, shutting the master bedroom door behind her. She went to sleep, certain she had won. I stood in the quiet kitchen, poured the hot water, and smiled, because Clara had made the fatal mistake of assuming the quietest man in the room was the weakest. To Clara and her wealthy, narcissistic circle, I was just a former tech consultant who had suffered burnout and settled into doing modest freelance analytics from a home office. When her father, a high-profile commercial developer, demanded a suffocating prenuptial agreement before our wedding, I signed it without a single objection. The prenup stated that in the event of a split, I was entitled to 0% of the family assets, 0 alimony, and 0 equity in any property bearing her family name. Her family laughed behind my back, convinced they had trapped a harmless dependent. Clara genuinely believed every meal I cooked and every chore I managed was an act of financial survival. She never asked why I gave up corporate life so easily. She never asked what I was actually doing during the 12-hour stretches I spent in my private office. She thought I was scraping together a few $1,000s a month. She didn't know that 8 years ago, before we ever met, I sold my medical data startup for $14 million. I never flaunted it. I didn't care for luxury cars or social clubs. I rolled the capital into an offshore private equity trust managed through an anonymous holding company. 3 years ago, when her father's firm was facing catastrophic insolvency during the commercial crash, they took a massive private bailout to stay afloat. That blind creditor was me. I held 70% of her father's senior secured debt. I held the personal guarantees on their suburban estate. And this luxury penthouse we lived in, her father hadn't bought it for her as a wedding gift. It was owned by my corporate subsidiary, leased to her father's firm under an occupancy agreement that could be terminated with immediate effect upon default. Her lover, Julian, was the chief legal officer at her father's firm, a man responsible for handling those very loan covenants. I sat down at the kitchen table. My hands weren't shaking. I dialed my corporate attorney. "Execute the default notice on the commercial portfolio at 8 sharp, I said calmly. "Freeze the executive compensation accounts and terminate the residential occupancy lease for the penthouse immediately." "Are you sure, David?" my lawyer asked. "This will liquidate their operating cash within 48 hours. Do it." At 7 a.m., Clara walked downstairs in a silk robe, brushing her hair, radiating pure dominance. She expected to find me sleeping on the couch, eyes swollen, begging for a compromise. Instead, 2 uniformed private security officers were standing in the foyer alongside a locksmith. Her designer luggage was already packed and lined up neatly by the front door. "What is this?" Clara sneered, her voice cracking with sudden rage. "David, what pathetic tantrum is this? This is my family's penthouse. I will have you thrown on the street in 5 minutes." I took a slow sip of my coffee from the armchair by the window. Right on cue, her phone began to vibrate violently. The screen lit up. "Dad," she answered on speaker, glaring at me with venom. "Dad, tell this useless parasite to get out of my—" "Clara, shut your mouth," her father screamed through the speaker, his voice cracking in complete hysteria. "What did you do? What did you do to him?" Clara froze. The color drained from her face in an instant. "What are you talking about? The blind creditor just called in the entire loan," her father sobbed openly. "The operating accounts are seized. Julian just resigned because his personal indemnity is triggered. We're wiped out, Clara, the sole owner of the debt. It's David." The phone slipped from her fingers, bouncing across the hardwood floor. Clara looked at me, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with sheer suffocating terror. The arrogance had vanished, replaced by the hollow realization of what she had provoked. "You," she choked out, trembling. "You told me you had nothing." I set my cup down, stood up, and looked down at her. "I said I didn't need your money," I answered quietly. "You're the one with nowhere to go, no one and nothing." I looked over at the guard. "Escort her out."